Yep, another Game Boy Advance port. Pac-Man World and Pac-Man World 2 got one, all made by the same corporate shills over at Full Fat Studios. This was inevitable, and by inevitable, I mean this came out 4 years later. You know, let me tell you something, guys. Game developers would go to the literal end of the earth, on fire and bleeding to make a GBA port. They would take a shot to the heart, they would jump off a cliff, they would sacrifice a duck live in 4K to make a GBA port happen. It was crucial, okay? Every game, every goddamn motherfucking poopy game got a GBA port or equivalent. Jet Set Radio, Super Monkey Ball, Jimmy Neutron, The Cat in the Hat, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Grand Theft fucking Auto. It was a necessity, a mastering of the arts. Every game needed one. Every franchise you can even imagine needed to be on the GBA. And why?
Good question.
Let's recap on the GBA ports in this franchise real quick though. Pac-Man World 1's port was like fine. I mean, it had some problems. I wouldn't feel safe showing it to my parents, let's just say that. It was dumbed down a bit, they removed a whole world, it was kind of sloppy, and there were occasional points of massive frustration. But you could do a lot worse. Pac-Man World 2, trash, like actual unbridled trash. They turned a 3D game into a side scroller, and it was clear they didn't know what they were doing, and I consider it one of the worst games I've ever played. But this one is really interesting. Let's remember the thesis of this introduction. Miss Pac-Man Maze Madness is a lot more simple, and as a result, the GBA port is actually a very seamless transition. It's not one for one or anything. I mean, they did cut a few levels, specifically the ones before the final Mesmeralda fight. There's some small things that are off too. Like in the original game, you could push an ice block into lava, use a reset coin, and then push another one, rinse and repeat. You can't do that here, so I really don't know how you're supposed to get this fruit. It might just genuinely be impossible.
What the hell was that?
What a cruel prank. I genuinely don't understand why they did this. Some puzzles have been completely dumbed down as well, and the TNT block timers have been substantially increased. You can take a phone call in the time they give you here.
Hey, how are you doing? Yeah, I'm good. I'm just playing Miss Pac-Man Maze Madness for the GBA.
You know what really sucks though is that there's no word of encouragement or a Pac compass for any area with the Pac dots, so often it's completely possible to leave the area while not having collected everything. The music here is also basically unlistenable, and in fact I actually had to mute the whole game because it was hurting my ears. Like the other Pac-Man GBA games, they're just ridiculously compressed. I recommend turning on an album or podcast if you're playing this version.
Or, you know, just don't play this version, probably.
Ugh, I hate these switches. In the original game, they would turn green if you walked in them, or as a confirmation you stepped on one of a set in the right order. Well, here they just turn into a slightly darker shade of red.
Listen, this is a Game Boy Advance game. I can understand cutting a few levels out, I can understand worse music, worse graphics. What I don't understand is not having the color green.
But you know what? For all the trash I just talked, they actually fixed the format of the game. The witch key thing has been very much downsized. A few blocks still exist, but only in maybe a few levels. So you can actually collect stuff on your first go around. It's crazy. The time trials have been shifted to much more lenient times, without any clocks or eating ghosts involved, and are more of a genuine speed run. You can basically get almost every star on your first playthrough. Not to mention, they lowered the total amount for the final fight.
I can't believe I'm saying this, but Full Fat Games kind of improved this game.
I'm not gonna sit here and tell you that the GBA version is better. Let's be fair, mostly everything is worse, but in terms of the actual game structure, it's a goddamn improvement. I still recommend you play the Dreamcast or PS1 version, and there's even entire side modes in the console games that didn't make it to the GBA version. These include a multiplayer mode where you try to collect the most Pac dots in a few different styles, and the ability to play OG Ms. Pac-Man. But you know what? Screw it. I'm saying it. I had more fun with this version than the console one, because the Game Boy Advance inherently doesn't ruin the gameplay. It still works nearly perfectly. We're not talking Pac-Man World 2, where it's basically an entire different game, or World 1, where they awkwardly had to adapt to 3D style. I mean, this is a faithful version of Miss Pac-Man Maze Madness, and it works in part due to that grid style and simplistic nature of the game. It's the best GBA port I've reviewed on this show, and that's not saying a lot, but it's saying something.
Unfortunately, Miss Pac-Man is yeah, it's kind of gone, so I don't think we're gonna be seeing a port, sequel, remake, unless they make the Pac-Mom character. It's just so much work that I kind of just don't see it, but you know, that's how life is. Speaking of life, I feel like I'm forgetting something.
You didn't pay your rent and now you're being evicted.